My name is Iris Berger, and I am an assistant professor of teaching. My home department is the Department of Language and Literacy Education, but most of my education and leadership roles are within the context of early childhood education, where I teach early childhood education courses, and I am also the advisor for the Masters of Early Childhood Education online. Okay, so maybe I will start with my current research. So my current research in early childhood education focuses on learning from and with early childhood educators about their outdoor or place-based pedagogies. And in response to the second part of your question, I would say that engaging in this kind of research can help us study about the ways that having children being in close relationship with the land, with the place, what might transpire in terms of how this kind of research could help us think about broader issues such as environmental degradation and climate change. So I have always been inspired by the notion of stories and how stories could be a vehicle for us to pass knowledge, to share memories, but also a space for what I would even call political action. So I really think about stories as something that could stir us to think differently. And in my research, so for example, in my PhD research, I was really curious about leadership in early childhood education and what might be a unique identity for this kind of leadership. And at the same time, within our province in BC, educators started working with a practice that's called pedagogical narration. So that's a really big word, but what it implies is that educators are collecting stories that I would say present some kind of a critical reflection about their practice. It's also a way for them to show to the rest of the community the complexity of their practice. And so that was one way of thinking about collecting stories in terms of research methodology. Another example that is more current is the work that I've been doing around this place-based or outdoor, studying outdoor early childhood pedagogy. So one example is what is called a walking interview. I invited the educators to go for a walk to tell me about the places that they visit with young children. And through that walk, I heard different stories about, for example, about a particular tree or a particular patch of mushrooms or a special rock that the children would like to visit. And what I think when you collect these stories, what I think is they give you is the kind of culture that educators and children, and very often also families, co-create within the context of early childhood education. I do remember a very particular moment that completely changed my thinking about research in early childhood education. So I do have a personal history of being an early childhood educator that I think created a very particular background for my interest. And that pivotal moment was when I was reading a literature review about research in early childhood education. And that literature review covered a large number of research papers and perhaps about 100, let's say, research papers. And what the author argued is that a very small portion of these studies focused on the work of the early childhood educator. So most of the studies were focused on the children, and the work of the educator was invisible. And that kind of gave me the impetus to want to study and make visible the work that the early childhood educator is doing, and kind of led me and supported me in arguing that we do need more research about leadership in early childhood education. Perhaps I will begin by saying that research never happens in vacuum. I do think context is really important. And one of our former colleagues here, Dr. Vanessa Andriotti, she wrote this beautiful paper called What Are the Tasks of Education? So part of thinking about future research is really paying attention or being attuned to the kind of current realities that we live in. And another part of this question is just to think about the word research itself, because research, it has the prefix of re, meaning going back, returning, asking again. So for me, it's not so much about this idea of new directions, but really paying attention to what is changing around us and how can we reframe the questions that we would like to ask so that they remain current and responsive to the kinds of realities in which we live right now. So for example, if we go back to think about place-based pedagogy, thinking about the outdoors, the fact that we are encountering very serious environmental issues, I think, prompt us to ask how this type of research relate to, for example, climate action or addressing some of the environmental issues that impact our lives.